about problems in social justice for as long as there have been, well, problems in social justice. I think it's just come really to the forefront in the last sort of 10 years or so. And if you think about it, it makes sense. It has been very difficult to have the interests of minority groups heard when, the traditional mainstream media is controlled by a relative handful of powerful white men with conservative political affiliations. With the advent and the exponential uptake of social media, everybody's problems are being heard, everybody's problems are being published. Everything that is causing social discord has become social discourse. One of the latest topics to fall under the microscope has been masculinity. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today, because as a gay man, I have my own unique take, my own experience of masculinity, both with myself, with society at large, and in the gay community. For me, conversations about masculinity really start with internalized homophobia. And if you're not aware of what internalized homophobia is, it's basically the same tenets of homophobia, which is anti-gay, heteronormative ideas of masculinity projected onto oneself and to the rest of the gay community. Growing up, I knew nothing of internalized homophobia, and yet that was what probably dictated most of my interactions and most of my behavior, and certainly a lot of my beliefs. I'm not necessarily ashamed to talk about my previous thoughts or how I used to feel about things. It does make me so grateful that I was able to come out and have a really supportive network of friends and family, and to express myself as I really am. When I was 16, I didn't think that I was going to have that. I was terrified of being excommunicated from the family. What do you call it? From being estranged from my parents. That's what I feared the most. And I had a conversation with my mum about this, and she was really shocked and disappointed that that's how I thought, but it really had nothing to do with the family culture and more to do with society at large. And there was just so much anti-gay and so much heteronormativity that it was completely normalized for everybody. And so I always thought that that's what I stood to lose, my family and my friends, which is a lot, especially when you're a 16-year-old. And so I always told myself that I was going to blend as best as I could and be as straight as I could, and I would marry a woman and I would have kids with a woman, and that probably from time to time my urges would get the better of me and I would sleep with men. This is no life that I want for myself. I didn't want it then, and I guess I saw that as the only option, but it's a terrible thought. It's a terrible thing to have to think when you're so young. But what's more terrible is that it's just happening all over the place. And if you live in a town like mine, where there is a lot of religion and it is very whitewashed and it is very country and very conservative, the result is that there are a lot of men who are living that life and living that position, and they fight tooth and nail to maintain that image of masculinity and heterosexuality that has become their lifeline. And this is basically the tenets of internalized homophobia. Not only are we struggling to achieve what society tells us is the masculine ideal, and this is usually it's a white man, it's a straight man certainly, it's a guy who's like physically fit and able and strong, and probably somewhere between the late 20s and early 40s. That is what society tells us is a perfect masculine man, or a man, in general, and that's what we all strive for. I mean, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. Every man strives to be, in some form or another, that guy. But most of us can't fit that mold. Nevertheless, we project that ideal onto ourselves and onto others in our community as well, particularly as gay men. And we reject everything that isn't that ideal. And that actually can lead to a lot of self-loathing when you don't achieve what you feel you should be. And from that self-loathing, very dangerous behaviours can emerge. And it's these behaviours that led Omar Mateen to commit hideous acts at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. This may have been internalized homophobia, as there was some evidence that he was active on gay dating sites and not sort of just in an attempt to surveil or to, find out as much as he could about Pulse nightclub. There are men who suggest that he was really upset if they spurned him or didn't want to have any relationships with him. And obviously one of the greatest, sort of most notorious serial killers, Jeffrey Dahmer, and I'm not suggesting it's completely internalized homophobia that led to Jeffrey Dahmer's actions, but that had to be thrown in the mix there somewhere, and it can be really dangerous and come out in really aggressive ways. And we can see it a lot if we look in the social media apps. Grindr, for example, which was one of, if not the first social media dating sites for gay men, and it's basically an app that allows you to peruse and communicate with guys around you, so located in your area. But some of these profiles, they're pretty much, most of the profiles on Grindr are geared towards sex and looking for a quick hookup, not so much for relationships. And as a result of that, guys feel like they're just going to get straight to the point about their sexual preferences, and they can be pretty racist and homophobic in what they put in their profile. I'll give you some examples. So this guy says, "I just want a guy who acts like a guy." And I mean, these are all emblematic of that internalized homophobia and striving for that ideal of masculinity, and straight men they are the ideal in the gay world. If I'm on, I'm keen. Hey, very straight acting by wanting to stay discreet. Very straight acting. We really need to know that this guy is just super straight acting. Average nice guy, friends and mates, straight acting, please. And it's really strange to me, this phrase, straight acting, is these guys know it's a farce and they don't care. As long as we're keeping up the appearances of being masculine, manly men, no different from straight guys, except we like to have sex with other guys. I mean, that's completely bullshit. We're not the same, nor should we need to be the same. Looking, nudity, 46. It's a country guy. And in Australia, this is like, well, at least in Queensland where I live, this is code for masculine man. If you're a country guy, or if you call yourself a bloke, it's very manly. Straight acting married guy. Again, Henry, never make fun of someone who speaks broken English. It means they know another language. This I threw in just because it shows how much racism and homophobia is on this app. That people feel that, and I should have gotten some other profiles where people are like, I'm femme and I'm cool with that. But people react to that division that's created with making these profiles. I could go on and on. Over on Scruff, which is another of these social media dating apps for gay guys, it's even worse. What I'm looking for, masculine. First thing, masculine. What about this one? What I'm looking for, masculine men to the front. Well, at least he's indicating that he's not completely discounting the femme guys. This one, extremely straight acting and discreet. Extremely straight acting. I mean, it gets full on. What interests me, real men. Real men. The implication here is that if you act effeminate or if you don't uphold the masculine ideal, you're not a real man. And this is not just internalized homophobia. This is what masculinity tells us. And if we are into football and if we're into physical work and we don't cry and if we, we're sexually aggressive, then we're real men. And if anything less than that, if we're anything less and we're anything other than that, then we're not real men. So that really pisses me off a lot. I want to show you this last one here. And this guy says, he lists what he's looking for. And he lists things like honesty and integrity, which, let's face it, this is not the common sort of hookup profile that you'd see. Guys wanting to shag other guys yet identify as straight. What the fuck? So he then says, it surprises me how many profiles have insulting or offensive comments followed by sorry, but I don't mean to offend. You are offensive, and it's either arrogance or a lack of intelligence that stops you from removing your crap. This I agree with, but I mean, this guy who thinks he's so self-aware is doing the exact same thing. Meth heads, queens, and bisexual bottoms. He is reducing people to this one aspect of them and discounting them based on that, rather than getting to know the individuals. Every bisexual man in the world who lets someone else fuck him, this guy, it's a turn off for this guy. I mean, this is the extent of internalized homophobia, an overall sort of view of discrimination in the gay world. And it comes down mainly to toxic masculinity, and always has come down to that. Now, the idea of toxic masculinity is a relatively new one. It's sort of been bandied around social media for the last 12 months or so. A lot of people have been wondering whether or not traditional masculine traits have led to some problematic behaviours and even are quite dangerous for women particularly, but the men themselves. So let's have a look at what people have been saying. Hayley Gleason from News ABC, that's the Australian broadcasting company, published an online article that discussed toxic masculinity and what this may be, and how masculine traits or traditionally masculine traits could potentially be harmful. And these traits include entitlement, homophobia, and sexual aggression, just to name a few. From a young age, we're socializing boys into manhood. I would even stretch so far as to say before boys are born, we're engineering them by giving them color-coded worlds, right? So we make up a nursery for a boy that's blue, and we stock it with toys that he's going to play with in the future when he's 1 or 2 years old that are toys for boys, masculine toys. So we start the indoctrination process really early, and little boys are not taught to be as emotionally aware as little girls are. And boys are told, don't cry, don't show your emotions, which is another way of saying don't deal with your emotions. And this is a really dangerous thing that leads to things like sexual aggression. It leads to dominant behaviour, particularly when men in general are physically more able, physically stronger than women. I know there are a lot of women out there who would kick my ass in 5 seconds flat. My point is, in general, men have a physical advantage. And this has translated over time into having the dominant position. The world is no longer purely about physical capabilities. So to have men in a position of dominance over women is redundant. Men are actually dying from social and lifestyle diseases at a greater rate than women are, and have poorer health outcomes. And this can in some large part be put down to their behaviour, which is driven by masculine ideals. Also, we have this crappy little Y chromosome that's sort of like slowly fading away. That's another reason why we die early, but that's besides the point. Not to mention, men are also dying from suicide at much higher rates, and this is directly linked in some studies to poorer mental health management, low mental health access, and poor self-care. In fact, a recent study published in the Journal of Counseling Psychology showed that men who display traditional masculine traits, such as power over women, self-reliance, and sexual promiscuity, have poorer mental health outcomes than men who don't display those typically masculine traits. And this is not to say that being a man is a bad thing, and it's not to say that every aspect of traditional masculinity is a bad thing. That's not what anybody's saying. But there are traditionally masculine traits, ways that men behave in the past and present that are impacting their health and the health of women around them. We know that more sexual aggressors are male than female. More cases of domestic violence are perpetrated by men over women. And this, in studies, has shown to be in some way related to a lack of emotional regulation, which might have even stemmed from early childhood. Of course, you attack masculinity or men in any way, anyone in a position of power, and you're going to get backlash. And there has been plenty of backlash over this topic over the last 12 months. One of the most notable that I've seen is an article published in Forbes magazine by Frank Miniter, and I'm going to read you a little bit of this article. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's just such bullshit. This article was The Hard Adrenaline-Soaked Truth About Toxic Masculinity by Frank Miniter. The Good Men Project blog does a better job of describing toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is a narrow and repressive description of manhood designating manhood as defined by violence, sex, status, and aggression. So right, it's a negative thing that must be repressed, as if manliness is a psychological disorder that only leads to aggression and violence, say these academics. Basically, they say telling young men to man up or grow a pair is making young men do violent things. They say old school patriarchal elements of society are pushing them to prove themselves to their peers in destructive ways. Yes, good work, Frank. Man's caveman traits, they argue, run toxic with adrenaline, unless our young men can swear off being men. Never mind that these academics are ignoring thousands of years of things like Christian virtues, Confucian principles, knightly conduct and gentlemanly codes developed and used to channel boys' natural aggression in positive ways as mentors show them how to be stand-up men living a chivalric code. All that is passé. I fucking agree with you, it is passé. Passé, however you say this. Look, I'm just going to not get into the nitty-gritty of that because it makes me so mad, but Frank is minimising the very real concerns that the toxic masculinity movement has to say. It is not painting every man with this aggressive, destructive brush, Frank. It is not painting every masculine trait as being destructive. You cannot ignore the fact that men create wars, that men perpetrate violence much more than women. This is not because of some natural aggression. This is because from a very young age, we are telling boys that men are strong, men are active, men will fight to protect what is theirs, and men don't have emotions worth showing. What do you think is going to happen? The backlash didn't stop with toxic masculinity, and in fact, one of the funniest social media trends was a hashtag masculinity so fragile. And the Independent from the UK actually put out a vox pop kind of article that said, what do you think about hashtag masculinity so fragile? Here's what you said. And the very first one was Jason Bowman, a 31-year-old guy who said, a lot of men assume that masculinity so fragile is an attack on their gender, which it isn't. The problem is that many men in society feel the pressure to act and feel a certain way if they want to be considered manly, to suck it up and show no emotion. So one, marketers exploit this insecurity to create gendered products where there's no need to do so, and two, men bury their emotions until they either lash out or commit suicide because dealing with your emotions, we're told, is weakness. And he has hit the fucking nail on the head with that, because that's exactly what happens. That second point especially, where we're told to suck it up, don't have your emotions, and so then we end up not dealing with mental health problems and we kill ourselves. Or we become aggressive people because we're not able to channel emotions appropriately. That first aspect brings about the lighter side of things, but it really does show you just how ingrained the fragility of masculinity is. Men are holding so tightly to this notion of masculinity that they will deprive themselves of the things that they would enjoy because it's not viewed of as manly. I think as a gay guy, I pretty much surrendered any notions of traditional masculinity and I think a lot of us do this, is when we say, I'm attracted to men. This is the ultimate non-manly thing, is to be attracted to men. And in fact, if you play the sexually submissive role in a relationship, you're even worse. You're seen as putting yourself in a woman's position. And if you have the position of being a powerful man, why would you ever want to give it up and be a woman? This is what they're thinking, but they don't even know it. So I think we sort of release that hold. Sometimes we release that hold on our masculinity and embrace that we are just people. I think we need to just let go of the notion that gender is this or this, and realize that it has nothing to do with what our body looks like, and it's everything to do with what's in here. And in fact, that doesn't really even matter at the end of the day, what our gender is, because we're just all people, right? And we, if a man wants to dress up like a woman, put on lipstick and heels and kick ass walking down the pavement, then what real impact does that have? If a woman wants to go out and play lacrosse or soccer and, go to the gym and pump iron, why does that have to be seen as her doing something masculine or manly? To me, it doesn't make any sense why we're limiting pleasure and limiting experience in our lives. So any man watching this, I want you to do something for me. I want you to look at yourself. Not in the mirror or anything, but it can start there, because it comes down to the way you groom yourself and the kind of clothing that you buy. And it comes down to the fragrances that you choose. If you're even adventurous enough to be wearing a fragrance of any kind. But I want you to look at how you interact, how your mannerisms are, how you speak to people, how you treat people. I want you to ask yourself, is this really who I am as a person? Or is this me shot through the lens of the masculine ideal? And am I just trying to attain that? Is everything I'm doing trying to achieve masculinity? And if it is, ask yourself, who is that hurting, if anyone? And does it need to be that way? And are you limiting yourself? Is there something in your life that you would love to do, but fear of being viewed as less than manly, is that holding you back? And for the women, I want you to just keep talking about this. Social media is a wonderful tool for disseminating information, even more powerful than the internet itself and what it's built, what social media is built on. I want you to keep discussing this and keep telling the men that you can see through their shit. That what they're doing is hurting themselves ultimately, and it's limiting themselves and it's hurting you. So keep talking about it. Changes won't happen overnight, but we don't really have a hope in hell unless we're talking about this and bringing it to people's attention. Because I know there's a lot of this stuff that I've never thought about before, and things that directly have affected me in the past, and things that affect me now still, I'm not going to lie. So that's all I've got for you today. I don't know what I'm talking about next time, but if you want to find out, please subscribe. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up, and if you've got anything to add to the conversation, please comment in the comment section below. Otherwise, I will see you all next time. Bye.